Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Debunked here on INX Prime. My name is Sulaimaan Ravat. The one term we've heard for years now in terms of political discourse in South Africa is BEE or triple BEE. We know this was something initiated by the ruling party, the ANC, to do something noble, and that is to address economic redress. There's no doubt that the wealth and the resources and economic control of the country in South Africa rested in the hands of the minority, who were previously advantaged, and there needed to be a mechanism to ensure redress, to deal with that, to ensure that progressively over a period of time, those who were previously disadvantaged were given a leg up, were given an opportunity to be able to narrow the gap. 30 years down the line, there seems to be near consensus that it has been exploited. It has made a small group of people richer, and the vast majority of previously disadvantaged remain disadvantaged. Even the ANC, to a significant extent, would acknowledge that. Now, do you abolish it altogether? Do you replace it with an alternate? That's where the debate lies. The DA, which is part of the GNU, has come up with what they call an alternative. They're calling it the Economic Inclusion for All Bill, right? And they're saying this would work better than BEE. The ANC doesn't seem to agree. They're talking about a full parliamentary debate, and we know the political rhetoric will now escalate as this particular discussion escalates. Those who seem to be for BEE say they are the champions of addressing that historic disadvantage, and they'll say 30 years later, the economy is still primarily in the control of the minority, the white minority. And those who are against it will say, well, look, it's been exploited. Look at the corruption that has gone with it. And in that political rhetoric, a lot of the facts, a lot of the figures, and a lot of the important mechanics around this particular model or any alternate model are lost. And that is what we want to debunk here today with political analyst Sandile Swana. Very good day to you, and welcome once again to the program, Sandile.
Thank you, Moulana Sulaimaan, and good day to all your viewers. Thank you so much.
So let's start with BEE or triple BEE or whatever you want to call it. Do you agree that fundamentally it was necessary, it was good, but in the manner in which it was implemented was problematic and has resulted in a small group becoming very rich and the large majority who were historically disadvantaged remaining disadvantaged?
Yes, the DA, the Democratic Alliance and the African National Congress both agree that something about the inequality, the historic inequality, needed to be done, to be attended to, and they still agree about it till today. Now, the part that we need to correct first and be very humble and honest about is that the ideas that underpin BEE, I will make it into two. After the 1976 riots, Oppenheimer and Rupert got together to say the black population, or those who are of non-European extraction, were excluded from the economy, needed attention because they'd become restless. You know, the 76 riots were that. So things like the Eben Foundation were founded, and then scholarships for black people were founded. A lot of us, including me personally, were funded by Oppenheimer, by the Anglo-American Corporation in terms of education. Were taken in large numbers into the big universities for the first time. And then it moved on to a place where Sanlam, a top Afrikaans company, started introducing black people to the shares on the JSE for the first time. I think it was 1992 when they did that with the Metropolitan shares. So the BEE that was started was led by the Americans through the Sullivan Principles and the big corporates in South Africa. It was largely a private sector-driven initiative. And then it went on, and then when the ANC comrades were coming back, some of them were identified. In fact, even the UDF comrades, such as Ntato Matlane, were identified as suitable candidates to be given shares. It was actually a mechanism for bribing the comrades, buying them ahead of time so that they become protectors of white monopoly capital in South Africa. Nevertheless, then there's the second leg of when I think around 2003, the ANC promulgated BEE. So BEE was no longer going to be any board of directors deciding to choose Sulaimaan or Sandile that is going to be the BEE partner, and the matter is that now they introduced what they call broad-based in law. So every company had to comply with the requirements of BEE, which from the 70s had been a general policy that the private sector was pursuing without any government supervision. So there are two types of BEE. One, the founders of the BEE, which was 100% controlled by white monopoly capital. Two, the one that was legislated, right? And both of them had their own different types of corruption. Because the first lot, in its essence, was not to actually transfer the control of the commanding heights of the economy to the black majority or the non-European majority in South Africa. That was not the intention. It was to create political bodyguards who would safeguard the status quo whilst inequality in South Africa. It would remain inequality, it would remain amongst the blacks, it would remain between blacks and whites, except that some blacks now would be part of the establishment, being a little bit richer than the average black person, and so on and so forth. So we need to distinguish between these two. But as to the necessity of changing who controls the commanding heights and the wealth status of each black household in South Africa, that remains still today. And both of those, before 2003 and after 1993, both of them were corrupt. Both of them were corrupt.
Now, before we go on to the alternate model being proposed by the DA, right? What I wanted to get your view on, earlier this morning on my radio program, I was speaking to a DA representative about this very issue. And he made a claim. He said, see, the very president, Cyril Ramaphosa, the very leader currently of the ANC, is amongst the biggest beneficiaries of BEE. Speaking to that first model that you spoke about, and the accusation from the DA is that he was the one who was enriched so that he could be the vanguard and he could be the bodyguard, for white monopoly capital, for the want of a better description, if you want to use that as a label going forward. And that's why they feel this alternate model needs to come into play. Would you agree, though, that Cyril Ramaphosa is a typical example of those who were used to become beneficiaries of this particular model and then become the political bodyguards, as you described it?
Yes, you'll remember that Cyril had developed a reputation as a troublemaker in terms of the unions in the mid-1980s. They organized one of the biggest strikes and so on. So such people like Cyril needed to be captured by white monopoly capital and actually tell us that in actual fact, liberation has come. There's no need to worry further. So he benefited materially. But we must not say Cyril is a culprit of this or that on the other. A lot of us, there's long lists of people who occupy big positions today, including me, who benefited. I may not have benefited exactly the same things that Cyril benefited. A lot of us benefited. For instance, who knows how I would have gotten the money to go and study at Wits had I not been given it by Anglo-American, plus the head office training in IT that I got from them. And there were many of us who were coming in hundreds every year, if not thousands every year during the 80s. So there are many of us who've benefited. There's no question about it. Cyril is just one of them. Obviously, we did not benefit, all of us, to the same degree. Well, I'm not a billionaire by any stretch of imagination. So there are many of us who benefited.
I was about to ask you if you got a pala couch.
Even if I were to have it, I think at best you'll get 40,000 rand or something. I'm nowhere near the 11 million rands and stuff like that. So no, let me make this point, and you'll probably know this even better than me because you've seen it at close quarters. Before 1994, in Lenasia and in Soweto, because that's the general region where I grew up, there were millionaires. There were black millionaires in Lenasia. There were black millionaires in terms of entrepreneurs. They were already there. But what we will find interesting is that white monopoly capital did not use those as the leaders who can lead the transformation of the economy. They chose, Cyril was not a businessman, he was a unionist. He was a worker, he was a representative of workers, not an entrepreneur. So the entrepreneurs that you could have produced a list, a long list from Lens and a long list from Soweto. I could rattle names right now. But all those people that we knew to be entrepreneurs were not the ones who were then chosen as the BE people. So quite clearly, even from a black perspective, the whole BE story was another story, especially when it came to shareholders. They were creating their new type of person, a new species. And Cyril is the new species. Cyril, Patrice, and then that's the new species that was created by white monopoly.
Well, now I know that you also have a background in lands and Soweto, just like me, Sandile. That's nice to know. So coming to what I was saying earlier on, right? That the political rhetoric sometimes dominates the narrative. So the ANC will try and project the DA as being pro-white or pro-white monopoly capital and rubbish their alternate proposal. The DA will hit back at the ANC as being pro-corruption and trying to protect their cronies who are benefiting from the current model, and that political ding-dong will go. If we have to dig deeper, what's your assessment in terms of what knowledge you have thus far as this alternate model of the DA is concerned? What are the mechanics? Because the devil is always in the detail. What exactly are they proposing? Can it work? Or are there shortcomings, and what are the shortcomings?
Yes, I've read the document. It's not the first time that I'm reading their proposal. Their proposal basically, it has got two elements to it. One element is that they want to change the Preferential Procurement Framework Act and the BEE Act. In essence, they want their entry point into transformation is the state procurement budget, which is about 1 trillion. So they are going to say, which then again, when you go into the detail of it, actually their proposal, to my mind, what they're trying to do is actually not consistent with the Constitution, especially clause 217, subsection 2. Because subsection 2 of the Constitution, clause 217, subsection 2, makes provision for preferential procurement from previously disadvantaged groups and from previously discriminated groups. Those were discriminated by apartheid. Mm-hmm. So whatever policy that you define, it must recognize those groups and target them in terms of that section, unless you are going to amend that section, which is not going to happen. So, but nevertheless, then the second element of their proposal is that you replace the BEE scorecard. Now, the BEE scorecard has got categories, right? So your BEE scorecard will have shareholding, it will have management and control, which is the senior managers, the directors of companies must have a proportional representation of the black communities. Then you have employment equity, which includes white women and black communities, to be employed equitably and on fair, equal wages, equal work for equal wages across the board, and be demographically represented. Skills development, it has got enterprise development, in other words, investment in small companies, supplier development, and general social investment, CSI, that we're used to. Now, it has got those elements in the scorecard already. They are proposing that you take the 17 United Nations SDGs and you scrap the BEE scorecard and you replace it with these 17 SDGs. Now, this is the issue. In Africa, under the AU, we are supposed to develop a national development plan. Every nation is supposed to develop a national development plan with a GDP growth rate of 6%. Now, in our process of developing our own NDP and the medium-term plans of South Africa, you use the SDGs, you use the AU plan, Agenda 2063, and then you use the NDP. So whether you are preparing a budget for that year, you already reference and incorporate these SDGs into that budget. So our budgets are already including that, national budgets, provincial budgets, municipal budgets, any budget for government must take cognizance of the SDGs, which national treasury must then fund and they must be implemented. So because our government has not been diligent and competent in implementation of its own NTP, and many economists have been analyzing that our national treasury, since the NTP was obtained, they've been deviating and not providing for the NTP to be properly implemented at any time. So what are you going to say? You are looking now for another avenue, which is state procurement to fund the implementation of SDGs. I think that is going to be a problem because we already have a channel for funding that. What we know is happening is a state that is incapable of implementing what it has written down. And that is what we need to do. Number two, to the extent that we want to correct procurement, already by 2016 we documented in detail what must be done and what must be corrected as regards our national procurement by Kenneth Brown. So you need to professionalize our procurement and implement it correctly. Lastly, if you want to take money from the companies and implement your SDGs, do just that. Take a tax and take that money, increase the taxes or do something to get that money from them. So to me, what the DA is proposing right now, based on the SDGs, we then need to say what is then the role of SDGs in our national budgeting system and our national planning system, because we're already relying on them to generate our yearly budgets in every sphere of government.
What about timing? The DA we know is part of the GNU, right? And something as a hot political potato like this BEEs in South Africa, bringing it up now. Why do you think? What do you think is behind the timing? Firstly, and secondly, what would be the impact then on the state of the GNU?
Okay, there are a few things we need to state here. The one that is straightforward is that if you wanted the BE to work properly as it is, the thing you need to liquidate is the mafia state. You need to eliminate the collapse in governance and the criminality in governance. People such as Nzamkwanas have triggered that process, that it must happen. And the DA is creating the impression that we must change many of our national programs because of criminals. Our education systems are failing because of the state capture and the criminality that is in the state and so on and so forth. So you don't change all these laws because of that. You must get rid of the criminality. Secondly, the other problem that we have is that elections are no longer guaranteed. We have had many programs, including land redistribution program, including BE, that the ANC has actually not implemented as originally intended. But the ANC is actually losing grip on power to the extent that the ANC would have wanted gradualist transformation as opposed to the seizure of the commanding heights of the economy by the black majority. The ANC and the DA both know that they both can lose power to MKP and the EFF at any time, in one form or another. But if the EFF and the MK were to take power and these BE laws are in place and they become serious about transformation, they don't need to go anywhere because the law will be already in place to actually take the land, take the assets and move on and do the actual transformation that the ANC has been delaying. So the DA, from a right-wing perspective and in line with Make America Great Again movement, they are right on time to say, guys, if you want to protect white supremacy and white assets and white interests, get rid of this law. Get rid of any law, including the law on expropriation of land, that if we were to lose election fair and square and other people who want to implement transformation were to win, we must have cleared the table. So you must not necessarily think that there is a conflict with the ANC about this. Bearing in mind that some of the people were financed to take the presidency and other senior office by white monopoly capital, some of them actually advocated for the ANC to join hands with the DA after the 2024 elections Snuki Zikalala, Mavuso Msimang, and all of those ANC veterans preferred a coalition with the DA rather than MKP and the EFF. So this is a good time for the right wing, and including the right wing elements within the ANC, to start this. And if they were to succeed, then they would slow down transformation if it failed.
Now, when we have this discussion about BE, right, it's a racial thing. We can't run away from that. So you've got whites and you've got blacks, and that aspect is understood in terms of previously advantaged and previously disadvantaged. But many times you hear from the colored and the Indian communities, because people don't look at the detail. Very few people, citizens of South Africa, will go and read the actual policy of the ANC and what the DA is counter-proposing. Where does BEE in its current form and what the DA is proposing actually accommodate for those who are classified racially as either Indian or colored? We know that there is another debate that, yes, broadly speaking, Indians and coloreds are also considered historically disadvantaged, but perhaps they were not as disadvantaged in the main as blacks were. So all those debates are in its place for those viewers who have this question in their minds, that both models, what the ANC has, what's and all, and what the DA is proposing, does it take into consideration these two racial groups, and to what extent and how?
So the law, basically, obviously there is other geopolitics that impacts on this, historically, dishonesty in actual fact. So the two groups, maybe three, if we're to be specific. So you would have the Malays, you would have the Indians, Pakistanis, you'd have the Chinese, and then you would have the other groups, your Khoi, your San people, the Abangoni, the Sotho type people, all of those groups that have not succeeded in being classified as white, whether in Britain or in the United States, because some Asians have been smuggled into whiteness elsewhere by the same Westerners. So we can't just say Asians. Some Lebanese regard themselves as white. Some Israelis coming from Western Asia regard themselves as white, and so on, and whatever. So for the purpose of this, I lived in Soweto. We didn't even know that, because some people don't even know that there are people who are Pakistanis. There was Dr. Abu Bakr Asfar, who served the people of Soweto extensively. And we received direct medical care from him. And there were other Xhosa-speaking, Zulu-speaking, Setswana-speaking doctors. And Moulana was one of them, and so on. But Asfar had dedicated himself to the townships and became an activist. So people need to be very careful of not being historical. In other words, you need to know the history. I'm not mentioning Lenasia carelessly here, because we used to go there for cricket as small boys, and so on and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of history that people don't pay attention to, as to who was oppressed and who was opposing that oppression, to what extent, and where was it happening. So if you are Chinese, you are Pakistani in terms of origin, like Asfar came from Pakistan originally, and so on and so forth. Those types of people are black people in terms of the law. They are the people who've been historically disadvantaged. There are a number of laws that could have targeted people of Asian extraction, people who came from Asia, certain types of people, we just call them Indians today, but actually there's a lot of subgroups and so on and so forth. They were targeted, specifically targeted by those laws. Because of the culture, the merchant culture that they came with into this country, they were able to use business skills to limit the full impact under difficult conditions of apartheid. I mean, for instance, it's still a wonder that they were able to build the Oriental Plaza in Fosbury. And those are models that perhaps youngsters need to still go back and study to see what was going on there in terms of economic empowerment of black people generally. Because now we are part of malls, we even have shops in malls that we don't. Forsberg was owned, the Oriental Plaza was owned by non-Europeans, and so on and so forth. So I hope people can understand that. If we exclude a lot of the Western Asians that have been co-opted into the whiteness, the bulk of the Asians are excluded from being classified as white, and therefore should continuously benefit from any empowerment process. And I don't subscribe to this idea that says, now, Sulaimaan, let's say now you have a furniture shop or something, that now we must disqualify you from empowerment.
All right, Sandile, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for joining us and having the discussion with us and enlightening us. And I think it's an ongoing discussion that we must have on a very key issue.
Thank you.
And all the best.
All the best.
Well, that's it. For those who may have joined us late, the discussion with Sandile Swana, yeah. It's the, what you call it, about the issue of BEE. We know what the ANC has implemented. We know what the shortcomings have been. And now we've got a proposed alternative from the DA. I just worried that we mustn't get caught up as citizens in the political rhetoric that will develop between these political parties. They go for rhetoric because it suits their political narrative. The DA will tell the ANC, you pro-corruption and you pro your cronies, that's why you're defending your policy. And the ANC will say, you anti-black and you just want to entrench white monopoly capital, and that ding-dong will continue. But what is in the detail? And what are the mechanics and what will work for South Africa? That is where we need to try and deepen our understanding. And this is just but a step in that particular process. Until next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.